He thought they were the same. In a company where people like him existed only in jokes whispered behind cubicle walls, the arrival of another openly gay man felt almost unreal. For the first time in years, Liam didn't feel like he had to carry the whole weight of difference on his own. But what he didn't know was that while he was reaching for connection, the other man had already built walls thick enough to suffocate in silence. Liam had been with the firm long enough to know what not to say, who not to sit with in the cafeteria, and how to make himself just visible enough to avoid erasure but never enough to threaten anyone. He was good at his job, good at playing neutral, good at enduring. Then came Jonas, new, older, quiet, eyes always somewhere else. He didn't speak much, but he wore the same pin Liam had hidden in his drawer on his first day and only dared to wear years later, a small, soft rainbow badge tucked near the heart. That detail alone made Liam's chest swell with a strange kind of relief, the kind of quiet acknowledgement only those who've spent a lifetime scanning rooms for safety could understand. At first, Jonas kept to himself, skipped after-work drinks, ate lunch alone, didn't join the team group chat, but he never seemed afraid, only detached. Liam wasn't sure if that made him braver or more broken. Their first real conversation wasn't anything special. A shared complaint about the printer, a knowing glance when a coworker made a comment that danced too close to a line, but sometimes in spaces where you're used to being alone. Even the smallest gesture feels like someone finally looking at you without the filter of discomfort. Weeks passed, and their exchanges turned into something more regular. They didn't become friends, not in the loud, obvious sense, but Liam started timing his lunch breaks to match Jonas's. He chose the coffee spot Jonas went to. He walked the long way back to the office just to keep pace beside him. And Jonas, without ever inviting him in, never once asked him to stop. It was the kind of companionship that wasn't built on words but on silence that didn't feel empty. When Liam asked him, one Thursday afternoon, if he wanted to come with him to Brussels for the weekend, it was almost out of instinct. The trip was already planned. Liam had been meaning to explore the city on his own. He needed a break, a breath of something outside the stiff office walls. But as he watched Jonas stir his coffee without drinking it, he heard himself ask, "You doing anything this weekend?" Jonas didn't answer right away. He blinked, looked down, hesitated longer than expected. Then, almost reluctantly, nodded. There was no excitement, no questions, no follow-up. But 2 nights later, they stood side by side on the platform waiting for the late train, and somehow that moment felt more intimate than any confession Liam had ever made. He thought the weekend would be simple, a shared escape. 2 quiet men, finally not alone. He didn't yet know that Jonas wasn't escaping. He was returning, and some returns aren't meant to be welcomed. If stories like these speak to a part of you few others reach, don't forget to follow Heart Stories for more. We tell the stories that are rarely told, the ones that stay with you long after the screen fades. The train rolled into Brussels just after dark. Liam stepped onto the platform with a sense of weightlessness. The city felt alive in a way their office never did, every corner pulsing with light, every street humming with possibility. He hoped Jonas felt it too, though the man beside him remained silent, hands deep in his coat pockets, eyes fixed on the stone beneath their feet. They walked through the winding streets, settled into a modest hotel, and agreed without words to explore separately for a while. It wasn't distance, it was just the rhythm they shared. By night, they met again, and under the dim glow of a neon sign in a narrow alley, where music spilled from the cracks of a crowded club. Liam had heard about this place, a queer club built inside a former theater. Locals called it a sanctuary. He smiled, hopeful. Jonas looked up at the building with an unreadable expression. And for a second, Liam thought he saw something close to hesitation. But the door opened, and they stepped inside. The bass hit like a heartbeat. Lights spun in dizzying hues: blue, violet, a sudden burst of red. Shirtless bodies moved like shadows across the dance floor, and the air pulsed with sweat, perfume, and something unspoken. Liam took it all in, stunned by the energy, the abandon, The feeling of being both invisible and completely exposed. Jonas stayed close but never touched. He didn't dance. He didn't drink. He scanned the room with a gaze that never landed, like he was searching for something that no longer existed. Liam tried to read him, but the noise made it impossible. Eventually, he leaned in and said he wanted to check out the other floors. Jonas didn't respond. He simply followed. They passed through a curtain of fog and descended into a space that didn't belong in any guidebook. Below the club was another world, a maze of black corridors lit by ultraviolet light, the air thick with scent and secrecy. Cages lined the walls, some empty, some not. There was no music here, only murmurs, groans, breathing. Liam froze. This wasn't what he came for. He turned to Jonas and whispered, "I don't think I want to be here." Jonas met his eyes for the first time that night, not with anger, not with concern, just an eerie calm. He nodded once, then walked forward into the dark. Liam stood alone in the corridor, unsure whether to call out or turn back. He waited. 5 minutes. 10. Time bled into something shapeless. When Jonas didn't return, Liam moved toward the exit, back into the noise, the light, the safety of music. He found a quiet corner by the bar, tried to steady his breath, ordered something just to keep his hands busy. A bartender handed him the drink with a nod but kept staring toward the hallway behind him. Liam turned and caught sight of a man speaking to security, someone who pointed toward the lower level, toward where Jonas had disappeared. Then the guard said it, not to Liam, but to someone else near the wall, a muttered phrase, nearly drowned in the music. He came back. After all this time, Liam froze. He didn't know what it meant, only that it was about Jonas. His chest tightened, not with fear, with confusion, with a sense that this trip, this club, this moment, none of it had unfolded by accident. Something was wrong. Something was missing, and Jonas was at the center of it. He moved toward the stairwell again, but this time the bouncer stepped forward, blocked his way, gave him a hard look. "You don't want to be down there," the man said quietly. "Not if you don't know what it used to be." Liam didn't ask what it was. He didn't need to. He waited by the bar another 20 minutes. Jonas reappeared eventually, face pale, breathing even. He didn't speak, just sat beside Liam and drank from the untouched glass waiting for him. They didn't say a word the rest of the night. They walked home with the silence of people who'd seen different versions of the same place. And somewhere between the steps and the sleepless hours that followed, Liam realized Jonas hadn't run from the darkness. He had once belonged to it, and tonight, it had recognized him. Liam didn't sleep that night. He watched the ceiling of their shared hotel room turn from darkness to dim gray, trying to make sense of what had unfolded in the club's underbelly. Jonas lay still on the other bed, facing the wall, silent except for the steady rise and fall of his breath. Not a word had passed between them since leaving the bar. And somehow, that silence screamed louder than any confession. Back at work the next week, everything returned to its unnatural normal. The hum of printers, the faint clatter of keyboards, polite laughter over stale coffee. But Jonas was different. He walked slower, flinched when the copier beeped too loud. And though he sat across from Liam, a fresh distance had returned wider than before. Liam, unsure what lines he could cross, said nothing, but something inside him had shifted. Not out of suspicion, not judgment, something closer to care. He knew that what happened in Brussels wasn't just discomfort. It wasn't about nightlife or nerves. It was deeper, older, and unspoken. A few days later, Liam lingered after hours. He hadn't planned to confront Jonas, but when he saw him packing his bag alone, he didn't leave. Instead, he said quietly, "That club, the one we went to, you knew it, didn't you?" Jonas froze. His hands stopped moving. The muscles in his jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. He closed the zipper slowly, then turned without meeting Liam's eyes. "It used to be something else," he said, his voice barely audible. "Before it had a DJ, before the neon, It was underground in every way. He paused. I was taken there. Years ago, I thought it was a safe job offer in Spain. It wasn't. It was a cage. In that place, he swallowed, his voice catching. That place was my cell. Liam stood still, not out of shock, but reverence, as if moving would shatter the fragile courage in Jonas's words. I got out, Jonas continued. I don't remember how, or maybe I do, but I've tried not to. What matters is I survived. That's all people want to hear, that you made it, but they don't ask what it kita. He sat down, like the weight of remembering had finally caught up. Then, for the first time, he looked at Liam fully. You want to know why I didn't stop those guys at the club? Because I've been the one begging for help while people stared. Because I've seen what happens when you spy, you speak, and no one listens. And because that guard, the one who looked at me like I was a ghost, Jonas's voice hardened. He was there. Back then, he watched. Liam felt his throat close. But you said nothing, he whispered. Jonas nodded. Because people forget. They change brands, they change names, but they don't change what they are. And then he added, almost absently, she. Jonas's mouth tightened. His eyes dropped to the floor. Brenda, he said, your manager, mine, the one who always smiles too wide, always asks about your weekend. She was part of the same network. I don't know what her role was. I just know her face. She was there. She opened the doors. She held the keys. The room fell silent again, not because there was nothing more to say, but because the truth had finally taken up all the space between them. Liam's chest tightened, not with disbelief, but with the terrifying realization that he had spoken to that woman, joked with her, trusted her advice, and now he couldn't look at her without seeing invisible chains. I didn't speak up, Jonas said softly, because I didn't think anyone would believe me or care, but Liam did. He believed it all, the club, the guard, the silence, the fear, and most of all, he believed that Jonas had been walking through a war zone while everyone else just called it nightlife. That night, Liam opened his laptop. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He searched, dug, tracked down old photos, news archives, chat forums from over a decade ago. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, but he knew what he felt. That Brenda had a past she buried deep, and Jonas had carried that in burial ground in his bones. What he found would change everything. But first, he had to decide whether to dig deeper or finally become the voice Jonas had never had. It took Liam 3 nights to piece together what he needed. The name Brenda L. appeared only a few times in public documents. A minor administrator for a defunct overseas agency. Nothing illegal, nothing detailed, but in archived photos from an old immigration support foundation long dissolved, he found it. A low-resolution group picture. She was there, smiling, standing beside a man Liam recognized from the club. The same security guard who had looked at Jonas as if he were a memory that refused to disappear. Liam stared at the screen until dawn, not out of shock, but out of rage. Not the kind that burned fast. The kind that sat deep in the lungs and made it hard to breathe. He didn't tell Jonas immediately. He needed time, a plan. Proof wasn't just about evidence, it was about timing. He watched Brenda at work with new eyes. Her polished professionalism, her friendly greetings, the way she always praised Jonas's quiet dedication, as if admiring a wounded animal from a distance. And Jonas, he didn't retreat. He moved slower, but he didn't hide. He began joining Liam at the community center every other week, sitting in the back of the support group for LGBTQ+ survivors. He never spoke, but he listened and stayed. Until one night, something broke. A man across the room, sharp-suited, loud, spoke with the kind of confidence only those untouched by violence could afford. He said he didn't trust people who carried trauma energy, said they were unstable, dangerous, said he wouldn't want someone like that near his little brother. Jonas didn't raise his hand. He didn't wait his turn. He stood, the chair scraping behind him like a scream. "I was trafficked," he said calmly. "Locked underground for 11 months. I didn't speak for 3 of them. Not because I couldn't, but because no one was listening." The room went still. I learned how to hear myself again in silence. And if that makes me unstable, then you're right. I am. But I am not dangerous. I'm just not afraid to name what happened anymore. He sat back down. The man didn't speak again. Later that week, Liam did what Jonas couldn't or wouldn't. He printed the photo, wrote a short statement, left it on the desk of someone in HR he trusted more than policy. Brenda didn't come in the next day, or the day after. No one said why, but her name was quietly removed from internal listings 2 weeks later. No announcements, no emails, just gone, like she had never held the keys to anything but a filing cabinet. Jonas knew Liam had done something. He never asked what. He didn't have to. One evening, as they walked side by side down a narrow street in silence, Jonas spoke without turning. "You didn't fix it," he said, "but you didn't leave it broken." Liam didn't answer. He didn't need to. Weeks passed. Jonas began speaking more at the support group. Not often, but with purpose. He never told his whole story. He didn't need to. Sometimes survivors don't need to relive their pain only to prove they outlived it. Then came the afternoon at the office. A younger employee, barely in his 20s, was being teased by another intern for wearing a rainbow bracelet. It wasn't violent, just the usual cruelty dressed in laughter. No one else intervened, but Jonas did. He stood in the middle of the break room, eyes steady. He has more courage in that one wrist than you do in your whole body. He said, "Let him be proud of what you're too scared to name." The room fell silent, and for the first time since Jonas joined the company, someone clapped. Liam didn't. He didn't want to interrupt something sacred. He just watched, knowing Jonas hadn't just found his voice. He had chosen to use it. The days grew lighter, not because anything dramatic had changed, but because something inside Jonas had shifted quietly, almost invisibly, into a space that hadn't existed before. A space where memory no longer dictated silence. A space where survival didn't feel like shame. He still didn't smile much. He still flinched at sudden noises. He still walked with a caution most people mistook for aloofness. But there was something different now. He stayed after meetings. He asked questions. He even made coffee for Liam one morning, no words, just the gesture, placed gently beside the keyboard. For someone like Jonas, that was a monument. Then came the Thursday afternoon that tied every thread together. The office was slower than usual. People had left early for a corporate wellness event Liam and Jonas had no interest in attending. They stayed behind, finishing reports. When a quiet knock came at the doorframe, a young man stood there, nervous, late 20s, new to the company. He wore a denim jacket too warm for the season and held a notebook to his chest like a shield. "Hi," he said. Are you Jonas?" Jonas nodded cautiously. The young man stepped inside. "I'm sorry to bother you. This is going to sound strange, but I think you helped my friend." Jonas looked confused. The man continued. "He was in Brussels a few months ago, at a club. Something happened. He never told me everything, but he mentioned someone who pulled him away from 2 guys, said it changed everything. He thought he was going to be hurt, but someone stopped it. Just walked in and interrupted it like it was nothing." He paused. "He never got a name, but he described you. And when I saw you in the hallway last week, I thought maybe it was you." Jonas didn't speak, but something in his expression softened. "He's okay now," the man said. "Better than he was. Still scared, sometimes, but alive. He wanted to say thank you. And I guess I did too." For a moment, the only sound in the room was the hum of a printer warming up. Then Jonas nodded. Not a big gesture, just enough. He didn't smile, but his eyes shimmered. Not with tears, with weight. The kind of weight that only lifts when you realize your pain didn't end with you. The man left as quietly as he came. Jonas sat back at his desk. He didn't say anything to Liam. He didn't have to. But later, as they walked out of the building together, Jonas spoke, almost to the wind. All those nights I thought I was invisible. He said, turns out I was seen. I just didn't know where the light would land. Liam looked at him and thought about how many people walk around believing they'll never matter only to find, one day, that someone else had been carrying their courage forward. Sometimes justice doesn't come in headlines. It comes in footsteps, in eye contact, in a stranger remembering you without your name. And Jonas, he had never asked for gratitude. But what he received that day was recognition. Something deeper than applause. Something gentler than closure. Something like grace. Have you ever been someone's light without realizing it? Sometimes the smallest actions leave echoes we may never hear, but someone somewhere is still standing because of them. For stories that remind you what it means to survive, to speak, and to be seen, follow heart stories. We tell what others overlook and what you never forget.